Okay, let's get this meeting back in order. Everybody will show up here in a minute or two. Could I have somebody move the consent agenda, please? Moved and seconded. Call question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. Thank you. Business arising from the minutes, none. Committee reports or recommendation. Electoral Area Directors Committee recommendations of September the 11th, 2024. 6.11, request for decision electoral area A to D Heritage Services funding proposal. Okay. Hello, Alex and Suzanne, wherever you may be.
Good morning.
Hey, Alex, you're going to speak to this?
So good morning, Alex Mackay, planner with the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District. I think this report is largely Suzanne's report, but I'm happy to answer any questions that the board has on the planning component. So what the proposed projects are. Thank you.
Any questions from anybody? Sorry, we're on 6.111, request for decision electoral area A to D Heritage Services funding proposal. No comments? Yeah, go ahead.
So the direction this is taking, well, Director LaFrance tries to connect to audio. The direction this is taking is that the implementation projects, the feasibility study, et cetera, be funded through grants and not taxation. And that's really the recommendation that what came from the EAD.
Yeah, and I think we all fully supported that at the EAD, that we didn't want to be raising taxes to fund this project because it was quite a bit of money, and so this way it's just grants.
That's it. Move the recommendation.
Okay, moved and seconded. Call question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. 6.1.2, request for decision, Canada Community Building Fund, previous gas activity fund, project funding request. And I will move this one. It's allocated to the Divine Water Service for replacement of solar power reservoir monitoring system. I'll second it. Seconded. Call question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. Direction request, agricultural land trust. Who's going to speak?
Is that?
I got the link in the invite.
Oh.
That's not my ambition. Oh, yeah. That's what you.
I can.
Bus tables.
Do you want to speak to this? 6.1.3.
Which one was that?
Just the agricultural land.
Ah, okay. Was there anything in particular you wanted me to speak to?
No, just, I guess my concern, when we brought this up at the EAD, we already have the ALC and whatnot. There were just things in here that seem to be overlapping with the ALC rules and regulations. And I was just thinking, we don't need to add more regulations for people to be farming. So if we're not adding to that, and we have the ALC, how is this going to be better for our farming community? That was my concerns then. Mike, you have some thoughts?
Did you want to answer the question first?
Well, I think that report, sorry, I'm Kim Needham, Director of Planning and Development Services. The report outlines the benefits of a land trust, and it was brought to the board a couple months ago and then referred to the EAD for further discussion. And at the EAD, it was suggested like that I think, I don't have the report in front of me, but there was more information that was requested in terms of staff to look into feasibility, potential participants in the service, and basically to do more research around a service establishment bylaw. So there really wasn't a tie-in to the Agricultural Land Commission that was referred to in the staff report.
I'm generally supportive of this. I guess my question is, if the resolution says that staff identify funding sources, would these funding sources look to pay for staff time as well? So we would add capacity, or would this fall into your current department and therefore be added to your already pile of work?
Yeah, good question. I think that would sort of fall out of the feasibility study, and we'd have to determine, how many hours this project would take and take it from there. It may be something that we would want to farm out to a consultant.
If it's something that we farm out and the funding supports that contracting or consultation on it, then I'm supportive of the direction, just recognizing staff load and the other things that we're all trying to get done. I would be hesitant to throw this on as a direction without that. So yeah, I'm happy to support this direction, but just to be clear, for me to agree to have this added to staff time would be because there are funds to support the consultation or farming out.
Chris?
I just want to clarify, my understanding is an agricultural land trust is not about more regulation for existing farms. It's a way of ensuring that there's some viable land for more people to start farming, essentially. Is that accurate?
Yeah, through the chair, it can provide a vehicle for many different, like they can take many forms. And one would be to either, purchase land and support farming. It could also go towards supporting existing farm initiatives, training. It can be sort of whatever we want it to be.
Any other points?
Yeah, this is something that I support. We have spent, and we do spend a lot of time with agricultural land committees. So we have an advisory function. And I don't see this as competing with them or interfering with them at all. We would probably go to them for some advice about how this might work and happen. I think, we're very good at establishing goals. We have these climate action goals and things like that. But when you start looking at local food production, that's something you're actively doing to sort of work towards one of our larger goals. Look, as we go into the future, if you want to look at ways that we as a community can have an impact on something like climate change, then if we could double the amount of food production in our area, that would have a huge impact. Well, locally. So what we're asking for here, what I see this is what is the feasibility of having this, and rather than us talk about this, that, and the other, let's hire somebody. We don't want staff to do it themselves, so we hire a consultant and have this study done, and then that will come to us as some recommendations about how we might go about it, or that it's something we should consider. So I think we should go in this direction. So has anybody moved option one? Has it been moved?
I'll move it if you're ready for that,
Yeah.
with some specific language. So that staff identify funding or grant funding program through a consultant to undertake a feasibility study to review, and then the items that are listed there. And then the rest of what we have in the staff report in the way of requests.
Can I just put a clarification? So I think the intent when it says staff identify funding sources was that, but I think what we should do is say staff identify grant funding sources to ensure that it's not taking out of current work plans. Staff effort.
And with specific reference to a consultant, is that?
Yeah, that's true, because when we do grants, we assume it's consultants, not, most grants are restricted to payroll.
Yeah, but I think that's what.
Yeah, there are instances by a consultant. Thank you.
Okay, so moved and seconded then,
Yeah, so.
okay, call a question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. Yeah.
One of the things that I mentioned at the EAD meeting was the area has very little agricultural land, and none of it is being used at the moment. So that when we start looking at this, the consultant is to, if we're gonna create tax services for it, that they all be proportional to what agricultural land that is available in each electoral area. Thank you.
7.1, request for decision permissive tax exemption bylaw 876-2024. Who will be? Pardon? Okay. Suzanne, good morning.
Good morning. This is Suzanne LaFrance, Director of Finance, and I'm presenting this bylaw for approval. It's a permissive tax exemption for the Britannia Beach Heritage buildings, and this started when there was the Britannia Beach development and there was a Heritage Revitalization Agreement bylaw number 1729 that was signed. And overall, looking at the average loss in tax revenue, it's estimated to be about $4,300 in tax revenue that we would be exempting. And that's based on what we have available at this time. Of course, 2025 budget hasn't been completed. So it's based on current 2024 services. And I'll just open up to the board for questions.
Suzanne, what's like a lot of the buildings there are obviously sort of heritage buildings that have been restored. Is this a precedent? Will they be potentially looking for permissive tax exemptions for some of these other buildings? Or is there some sort of line or cutoff as to why these buildings would be eligible for exemption and not any of the other ones in Britannia?
I'm not sure about that, but what I know is it's all based on the original Heritage Revitalization Agreement bylaw that was signed. So just specific buildings are involved with that. And it's only on one plot of land. So if there's additional heritage buildings, I don't know of them. And it's not something that's been included in this.
I just consider, again, to me, the majority of that development or a good chunk of that development is sort of heritage buildings that have been restored. So right now I'm supportive of this, especially at a tax implication or a lost revenue of 4,000 and change. But if all of a sudden all the buildings were going to be eligible for that in Britannia North, then I'd like to know if we're setting that precedent. That was my only concern on it.
Yeah, the only buildings in Britannia that are registered as heritage buildings are the ones in the commercial village, to call it, give it a name. And within that that commercial area, they are all heritage buildings with the exception of the maintenance building, which was brand new, and so that one wouldn't be included. It is just the heritage building is currently located within the folio, which was the list of buildings that we used when we first approved the tax exemption. So I don't think there's a concern. There are other old buildings in Britannia. There are other buildings that at some point could be considered or put forward as, heritage, to give them heritage status. But that hasn't happened yet, and if it does happen, I don't think it doesn't impact this particular arrangement at all.
Sal, and then Mike.
Yeah, I've got one question, Mrs. LaFrance, and that's, is this these heritage buildings, is it owned by a nonprofit organization or is it owned for a for-profit organization?
It is owned by the Britannia developers at the moment. That folio, yes. So they're not a nonprofit society.
So on the permissive tax exemption policy or bylaw, how does that relate?
It's through
For-profit
the,
organizations
Yeah,
have that tax?
it's through the heritage exemption, which is separate from the regular exemptions. So if you look at the Local Government Act, section 391 to 396, the first section is the overall exemptions, which are unfortunately limited for regional districts. We have recreation services by nonprofits, and that's the only nonprofit other than places of worship. The other interest would be nonprofits' interest in school buildings, which we don't have any of those. And then there's heritage exemptions, which are separate, which are only available when you have this heritage revitalization agreement, or there is one other mechanism for heritage exemptions, but it's escaping me at the moment. So it involves having to have a proper heritage revitalization agreement, and then they have to adhere to this agreement. So it doesn't have to be a nonprofit in that case.
Okay, thank you.
Mike and then Chris.
No, thanks.
Chris.
I just want to clarify, like in Squamish, we have some other agreements which commit us to doing a permissive tax exemption essentially, or, sets that expectation, and we still have to go through the process. And I guess I'm trying to clarify, was there already sort of a promise or an expectation set that this would be done, and so we sort of already made the decision, or is this sort of like a new request?
No.
Through the chair, the question I've actually asked Director Needham to come in to answer that, anticipating that to be the case. The bylaw, the heritage bylaw that addressed these, and she's right here, you can even see that. Right, can you do you mind just give some background on the bylaw that addressed these as heritage homes at the beginting, and if it's
Yes, thank you, through the chair. So these sorts of heritage tax exemptions are put in place to help support preservation of heritage buildings. Quite frankly, it would have been a whole lot easier for these developers to have torn down all of those buildings and started fresh. And they chose not to because they love Britannia Beach and they wanted to see that original mining village preserved. And so these exemptions have been discussed at the board in the past, and we did a heritage revitalization agreement. And through that, all the heritage buildings were identified. There is a heritage, the buildings are on heritage register. And there, through the register, there's been a whole study done on each and every one of those buildings, outlining the heritage values, the history, etc. of each building. So that's how this all came about. And this is done in many communities throughout British Columbia in order to support developers in preserving heritage structures.
Chris.
And just to be very clear though, it sounds like then maybe we set an expectation, but there's no actual agreement sort of promising the exemption. Is that just sort of?
Yeah, I mean, we can't make an agreement that's going to bind a decision of the board. This has to be done every year through this process that we're doing. But I think there has been a tacit support, at least from this board, to support the preservation of the structures at Britannia and to support these developers in all of the added expense that they've gone through to restore and preserve those buildings. And I think most of the board has been to the site to see what has been done, and I think when you go there and you see the immense amount of work that's gone into that project, it's really the developers went above and beyond to protect a lot of those buildings.
Tony?
Yeah, and this is not a in perpetuity. This is a 10-year program. When it first was brought to us, they talked about 100% exemption to start with, and then just factoring it down until there's 0% exemption. So in 10 years' time, they'll be paying full taxes. I'm in support of this.
Okay,
I was gonna move stuff, the recognition.
moved and seconded. Call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried.
That was the first that.
Okay. Can I get somebody to move to second that?
I'll second.
Move the option, okay, moved and seconded. Call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. Okay, request for decision, 7.2. Request for decision, proposed bylaw amendment. Delegation of purchasing and related authority bylaw number 1788-2022 and proposed policy revisions. Purchasing policy number 34-2022.
So Suzanne, this is to talk about if there's any questions.
I believe Miss Reed's in the waiting room.
Suzanne's going to speak to this then?
Miss Reed.
Sorry, I believe it's Kristen Clark that's created this report, or Veronica Reed. There you go.
Hi, Veronica Reed, Project and Program Coordinator with the SLRD. This is just a couple edits to the purchasing policy to add in the Deputy Director of Finance for signing authority and to authorize the CAO to approve the procurement over 500,001 for items that are already in the financial plan and approved by the board.
Any questions? Okay, so we'll move to approve the recommendations as set out above, preferred option, which is 1.
On with that.
Moved and seconded. Call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried.
First that.
That's first that.
I'll move adoption.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried.
I'm gonna find that. There's 3.
Oh, so
If you go off this.
Oh, okay, I missed that. Okay, moved and seconded.
I'm moving fine with that.
Call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. Thank you. 7.3, request for decision. Electoral Area A zoning and OCP bylaw amendments, Braylorn Adventure Lodge, third reading. Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I believe Ms. Mackay is going to be presenting this.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Good morning. So again, Alex Mackay, planner with the SLRD. This report is concerning the OCP and zoning bylaw amendments for the Braylorn Adventure Lodge in Electoral Area A. And this report is to update the board on the results of the electronic public hearing that was held on July 30th. At the public hearing, there were a number of public concerns that were raised, including the location of the proposed cabins, challenges with public disturbance, and the need for a more robust management approach. So we received 7 written submissions in conjunction with the public hearing and 8 oral submissions. I'll just briefly go through what we heard. So again, we heard some concern around guests making excessive noise and speeding through the community. And I should mention they are currently operating the existing lodge building as a tourist commercial operation. So these submissions are in response to that, as well as contemplating the intensified tourist commercial use on the parcel. We heard some concern about the fact that there isn't an RCMP presence in electoral area A, so it can be difficult with respect to bylaw enforcement if there are noise issues. We did have a member of the public inquiring about how we determined where on the parcel the proposed development would land, and staff did clarify that was determined by the riparian assessment areas that constrain the parcel. We also heard some concerns around the environmental impacts of the potentially increased amount of recreation in the surrounding lands, trails primarily. And then we had a member of the public express that they really wanted to see a more robust description of what they were proposing and how that would be managed to address some of the public concerns moving forward. The other thing I'd like to update the board on is that we did receive a late referral response from Interior Health. We got that on July 4th. And Interior Health was looking for clarification on a number of aspects of the proposal. So they were looking for clarification on how the existing pool and hot tub on the site is being operated. They noted that the proponents do not currently have a permit on file, so they've requested that the use be discontinued until they secure a permit. They had some questions around food and beverage services and some questions around the water and septic servicing, which have now been resolved. Interior Health has requested that the SLRD not consider adoption of the proposed bylaws until it can be confirmed that they're in alignment with the provincial health regulations. So in terms of how what has changed since this was before the board last for second reading, the proponents did respond to the concerns around the proximity of the proposed cabins to adjacent private property, and they've now reduced the proposed density. They were previously proposing 8 tourist commercial cabins. They've reduced that to 6, and they've taken the 2 that were most closest proximity to private property off of the plan altogether. They have also provided a little bit more explanatory text in terms of what their plan is for the property, and that's appended as Appendix B to the staff report. There are, as previously discussed when this was last before the board, a number of conditions the applicants need to meet in order for this to move forward toward adoption. And I do want to mention, so if third reading was to be granted, once that happens, the applicants have a maximum of 18 months to meet the conditions. And if they don't meet those conditions within 18 months, the application would lapse and they would need to reapply. So quick update, servicing, they are required to connect to the new Braylorn sewer system. They have initiated discussions with the SLRD Environmental Services Department, but they have opted to leave that work for after third reading if that is given. They have previously been granted by the board permission to discharge the existing flood construction level covenant. They are currently working with their legal firm to do that, but that does not need to be met prior to adoption. That's something that would need to be in place prior to issuance of development and building permits. They do need a change of use permit for the existing lodge building that's currently operating as a tourist commercial operation. They are in the process of applying, but they have not done so as of yet. And then finally, that compliance with health regulations piece I mentioned, Interior Health would like the SLRD board to hold off on considering adoption until the health regulations have been met. So they have that permit for operating their pool, and they've confirmed that they're in compliance with the food and beverage operation component of that. So I will leave it there. I'm happy to take any questions the board may have on this application and next steps. Thank you.
Are there any questions? No. Chris?
I guess I struggle a little bit with this one. I mean, some of the resident concerns seem legitimate, and the response from the proponent seemed a little bit vague, but I also, my understanding is that if we were to just deny this, they could still sort of keep doing what they're doing. I take it there's no real authority though, like we have no say through our zoning whether they still continue to build trails and do all this sort of thing that's really outside, so we don't really have through zoning tools to address the resident concerns. Is that accurate?
Thank you through the chair. So there's a couple of components to that. One is they do currently have zoning to operate a bed and breakfast, but they are required to have an operator be resident on the parcel in order to do so. And they also need the change of use permit. So it would need to be brought into compliance with our zoning. They would need to have an operator on site. They would need to complete the change of use permit so we can ensure that the life safety components under the building code are met for that piece. But they are also applying for increased tourist commercial uses on the parcel. So that being the assembly use to have events on the parcel and the 6 new cabins. So that's what is really being contemplated here. That would increase the number of people utilizing that parcel and potentially be tied to some of the concerns that were raised by the community at the public hearing.
Any other questions?
I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay, right.
I'm gonna pick option 2, request further information prior to giving amendment bylaw number 1862-2024 and or amendment bylaw number 1863-2024. Further readings. I would like to request a more detailed management plan beyond what they provided in Appendix B, and that it addresses the concerns raised from the public hearing. And with that, and another that the board directs staff to schedule and advertise the public hearing to be held electronically.
Okay, moved. Seconded, any order?
Yeah, second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions?
Can you just read that again, please, Sal?
It's option 2, so it's in the thing there.
Oh, so it's on, you didn't change option 2, I think you changed it.
Yeah, but the further information is the piece that I'm speaking to. I would like to request a more detailed management plan beyond what they provided in Appendix B, and that it addresses the concerns raised from the public hearing. And that the board directs staff to schedule and advertise a public hearing, as that initiates another public hearing.
Just a quick question, if there's nothing, do we need to put in the rescheduling of a public hearing? Or is it possible that nothing substantive will change through that and therefore a public hearing might not be necessary?
Through the chair, legal counsel has advised that this management plan would constitute new information, so that would trigger the need for another public hearing.
Thank you.
Marvin?
I understand where this is both coming from and what it's like, what the concern is aiming to address. I just wonder what tools in zoning, like OCP zoning matters, if the commitments of a certain management plan aren't met over time, like what tool do we have, or what recourse do we have? It doesn't trigger a down zone if the management plan isn't adhered to. So I struggle with this one. I see where we're going, but is there a better tool for this? I don't know what this one is. They can make all sorts of promises, and I don't know that we have levers to hold them to that, unfortunately. Although making public statements is maybe that's the only tool. I want to be clear that if that feels like that's the case to me, is having these folks make a public statement of their intention, but we have no other mechanisms. I just want to be transparent with you.
I'd like to speak to it. Around two years ago, maybe 3, we never had a noise bylaw, and we went through the process and we got a noise bylaw now. So, and it's very detailed, very similar to the other electoral areas now. And there's that. As far as related to the road issues, there's the RCMP that they can go to. And as far as the trails, they can go to the RAP line. So there are options for the community to move forward on some of the other issues that they've addressed, which they haven't done yet. Either of those that I'm aware of. So there are options for the property owners there if they've got issues.
Okay, Chuck?
Yeah, I'm gonna vote against this. I think that the staff's preferred option makes more sense. I agree with the statements about going down and having taking this kind of input and then not being able to do anything with it is concerning to me, so I'll vote against it.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Okay, 7.4. Okay, 7.4 is request for decision, electoral area C zoning bylaw amendment, Wedgewood Estates SL 12, second and third reading. Any questions? So.
I'll move option one.
Okay,
Third option.
seconded. Moved and seconded. We have 3 that's. Okay, moved and seconded for option 1. So that would be the first that. Moved and seconded. I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. The second that. Okay, moved and seconded. Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. And the third that would be to move it on to Ministry of Transportation.
Option, yeah.
Yeah. Moved and seconded. Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. So 7.5, request for decision, shipping containers in electoral area A, first and second reading for amendment bylaw number 1871-2024.
Yeah.
We have to have one question.
Pardon me?
Just one quick question.
Yeah.
Certainly makes sense to support those folks that need to do the work they need to do for the cleanup. I guess I just wonder, is there, and maybe I missed it in the report, is there a time expiry on this when, or when the board would look at it again to see if it should be renewed? How does that work?
We would bring it back to just amend the bylaw once the time runs out. Yeah.
We'll move it.
Seconded. Any other questions? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Request for decision, development variance permit delegation amendment bylaw. Who's going to speak to that? Pardon me? Kim's going to speak to this?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you, Chair. This application, or sorry, this proposal is to provide delegation authority to myself to deal with certain kinds of variances. We brought this report to the board a couple months ago, and there was general support for the approach. It's actually quite timely because we just got a variance for a 5 inches of a roof overhang, and this is exactly the kind of thing that you guys don't need to be dealing with. So this bylaw, if adopted today, will help to delegate those smaller types of development variances to myself. And I do already have delegated authority to deal with a number of different kinds of development permits.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted, I recall sort of being concerned about the 50% variance for setbacks, and we had a conversation, I felt comfortable. I don't recall it being about height, which seems to me you could take a 4-story building to a 6-story, which I think people would get, agitated about. So am I missing something, or is there a reason why? Because again, 5 inches, sure, that makes sense, but if it's like 4 to 6 stories, which this seems to permit, that seems like a lot more. Is there a reason why that is something other than what I think it is, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think if there were a situation like that where it was an extensive variance, I would just bring it to the board. It gets into stories on buildings. Usually we're talking about 1 meter to 3 meters, maximum. So, yeah, I don't see a situation where we would be allowing for such a huge variance.
So is there a reason why then we wouldn't say the lesser of 50% or 3 meters? For example?
Well, then you get one that's 3.5 meters and I'm just thinking of all the ones we've had for Britannia with such odd shaped lots there that anybody who wants to build a rectangular deck is going to need a variance for one portion of that deck quite likely, and it could, to start putting a limit on what staff are able to do.
Right, somewhere.
Lori.
Thank you. I don't support this development variance request, and only because it puts the weight of the decision on a single person versus the strengths of a board decision. And while I think Ms. Needham does a great job, what if she's not there? And who replaces her? And often it's a small additions to the job duties that create the work overload. So again, the accountability to a single person it doesn't sit well. I think also on an off note that some of these variances are pretty educational for the board. I think it's important for the board to know what's going on within the region too. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll speak to that. There's probably a lot more staff time involved in actually preparing a staff report, coming to the board, presenting it. And another factor here is in time savings for our applicants and providing service to our clients. So depending on when an applicant submits their application, they may be waiting several months to get before the board, which of course in a construction window, which can be quite tight, can really cause delays. If we have a delegated authority, it means that I can approve an application within a couple of days of it coming in. It's not a huge time constraint. There is also an appeal process that is available through our fees bylaw. So if somebody or a member of the public is concerned with my decision, it hasn't happened yet, but it could happen, they can appeal to the board to have that reviewed by the board.
Farming.
Yeah, thank you. I was aware of I think delegated authority sort of broadly is really an important piece so that we operate at the appropriate level and are judicious with our time at this table. I think, so I think this is close. I have to say with Director Pettingill on so there's a challenge process if someone doesn't like your decision. And then we just heard that if there was something that you felt sort of fit this but made you uncomfortable, you could bring it to the board. I just wonder about the mechanisms there. Because to me, if we've delegated it, we've delegated it. We need to make sure that we put reasonable boundaries to that. So this 50%, that height piece is the only piece that feels like it could be in that scenario, like similar to Councillor Pettingill or Dr. Pettingill painted. 50% is huge in the height variance. I get that there's a reasonable pieces. That piece just feels challenging to me to include in the text. So I wonder if there's a way to soften that. That's for my pieces. A lot of these we don't, right below that table, it says, if the table was applied to the 14 variance process between 2021 and 2023, 9 would fall under the delegated criteria. So it's taking work that doesn't necessarily need to happen at this table away. And I appreciate the response, but I'd like that response to be reflected better in the in the policy. At 50% height pieces feels challenging. That's massive.
So,
Yeah, we do get development permit reports. And it'd be really good on specifically on this variance permits that there's a little bit more detail in them. That way we're informed of what's going on. I mean, I look at them all the time. And as stated in there, we don't get a lot of them. And so it'd be good if in the reports that we get, that there's more detail in the ones that have been approved. Thank you.
Jack? No, okay, Chris and then Tony.
Yeah, and so again, I do actually really support delegation. Probably the more we can do with the right constraints, the better. I think, yeah, it's that 50%. I would actually switch to do 20%. On the height, 50% on the parking myself, but be satisfied with the, a little more of a constraint on the height, something that gives us enough flexibility that we still, the 9 would have been delegated, but something that potentially allows for 2 stories seems a bit excessive. And I just want to clarify on the appeal process. My understanding is that would apply to a proponent that doesn't get the result they want, but if neighbors or others didn't like the result, they would have no mechanism to appeal that. Unless I'm mistaken.
Yeah, through the chair, a neighbor would have to write to myself or the board and request that it be reconsidered at the next board meeting. Like a reconsideration review. So it would have to, the board has the ability to reconsider a decision that it made at the following meeting. So that is a possibility.
Tony?
Yeah, I support this. I think the most compelling argument for me is the time and money thing. The time for our staff, cost for us in terms of staff time. If we can expedite the process so that people can get on with their building, it's good for them. They haven't got to wait around for weeks or months, and it's potentially cheaper for them as well, because they have to, maybe you can have a scenario where something had to be delayed over the winter, maybe 7 or 8 months, and the cost can go up. So the concern that Chris has about building a 4-story building going up to 6 stories, where's that going to happen in one of the rural areas? Possibly in Britannia or Fairy Creek, but I would think there's a way of dealing with that. Well, thinking of Fairy Creek, if they wanted to take a 6-story building and then put it up to 9 stories, I can guarantee there'll be an outcry from residents in Fairy Creek. So I'm not concerned about that height thing.
So through the chair, anything that's going to be 4 stories in the SLRD is going to be in our master plan communities, and all of those projects are subject to development permits. And through the development permit process, we have to bring all projects over 500 square meters to the board. We can also do variances through development permits. So those would all come to you anyway.
Armand and then Mike.
Jack.
Oh. Jack.
I'm comfortable with this. I think Mike I don't think he was speaking to the whole board when he said it, but you gotta draw the line somewhere, and I feel like 50% is reasonable.
Armand and then Mike.
Mike, seeking a path through this, I generally support this overall direction, and given that we're hearing that 50% is unlikely to be used, I wondered if that 20%, if just moving the height into that parking category achieves essentially the same, is that workable enough to make everyone comfortable with the regulation, as that feels like a more likely window, but that I'm acknowledging I'm going on feel. I've done an analysis to see if we're getting, if it's 21% is more appropriate for height, I don't know, but it feels like that might be a more reasonable path through here, just putting the height into the parking category that has a 20% threshold, as that's far more likely to fit the numbers that I'm hearing around, you know, overall height variances. Is it that simple?
Through the chair, I mean, if the board feels more comfortable, making it at 50% to a maximum of 3 meters. That's a reasonable request.
A variance.
Yeah.
That's, you feel like gives you more room than the strict 20%, that was my sort of.
I mean, 3 meters is essentially a story. If we had a variance that's adding a whole story within a single family neighborhood, I would probably be bringing it to the court anyway, because I don't want to have that on me, quite honestly. So
the policy, but then the policy, the text of the policy should reflect that. That's what I'm trying to, that's what I'm trying to get to, like what text in the policy we put in that would reflect that? If it's 3 meters, if it's 20%, is it?
50% to a maximum of 2 meters even, at least it keeps it to less than a story. And if that works for the board, that works for me in terms of the height variance.
50% to a maximum of 2 meters.
Yeah. For height.
Yeah, I mean, I was about to say, I'm not comfortable with anything that allows a story to be added, and to Tony's point, well, I can't see where it would happen. We don't see where it would happen. Somebody's gonna come up with a great spot, they're gonna put a second floor on it, and we're gonna have the neighbors barking at us, so. We can't foresee all that, so I would like to have some restriction on it. What Director Needham just came up with, it's got my attention. I was gonna shoot for the 20-30% somewhere in there just to prevent the extra story, but I think you may have given me the comfort I need, knowing that we can't add an extra story by a maximum 2 meters. And I would say, just to state the obvious, I mean, you sort of said it yourself, you don't want to take that on to yourself if you're not sure. I think it's just really important. We're trying to delegate. I'm all for the delegation. It speeds things up for the resident. It streamlines for our staff. But I just want to say the obvious is that a lot of these variances can result in disruption to neighbors, or as far as they're concerned, their ability to enjoy, how do we put it? Their enjoy substantially affect the use and enjoyment of adjacent land. If somebody's able to make that case, if you see that, let's not take the chance. Let's bring it here, because it'll end up being 3 times as long and much more clumsy. So if there's an inkling that this can disrupt neighbors, that there's gonna be people in the area that are unhappy with this, I'd love to see it come back to the board.
Yeah.
But with what's put before me, I would support the resolution with the amendment that we go up to 50%, maximum 2 meters on the height.
You move that on second.
I'll move it.
Moved and seconded. Call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. Now, yeah, so move to adopt. Move to adopt, seconded. Moved and seconded, call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. Yeah. Yeah, I think we should do that. We have a 1 o'clock delegation for Little Lake Estates. So let's break for lunch now, and we'll be back here at 1.
What the pros have it. Do you know before I know?
Okay, let's call this meeting back to order, and we're on 8.2. Information report, Catiline Creek debris flow mitigation project. Status update number 5. Mike is there. He's going to lead off on this.
Yeah, and would you like brief presentations of the staff in the room first, Chair?
Sure,
Yeah.
please.
So Philippa Campbell, Project and Program Coordinator. for the SLRD.
And Alex Chappell, project manager for the SLRD.
We have Kristen Clark, Director of Strategic Services here in the gallery as well. Yeah, back to yourself.
Okay, and Mike is right there, okay? Yeah, if you want to do your presentation, by all means, start.
All right, thank you very much. I'm Mike Strain with CapEx Projects, and I'm working as a project manager on this project closely with Ali and Philippa. Here to talk about the Catiline Creek Flow Mitigation Services Project and status update number 5. So next slide, please. For the agenda, we'll again be touching briefly on project governance, location of the project, and the project objective. And then we'll go into more detail and provide updates on the scope, budget, costs and funding, service and loan, schedule, risks, and next steps. Before we get started, just a high-level glimpse is that the project is currently at the design completion and permitting phase, and we do have some challenges moving the project to the tender and construction phase, which I will address in the presentation. Next slide, please. Again, this is just a quick reminder with regards to the project governance and organization. What isn't shown here is all of the other partners and rights holders that we are continuing to work with, including the community of LLE, the various permitting bodies at the provincial and federal levels, grant fund administrators, and First Nations. With so many parties involved, you can see that this does add multiple layers of complexity to the project. Next slide, please. We've seen a slide before. Again, the project is located on the north side of Lillooet Lake in the traditional territory of Lillooet Nation, with the creek passing through public land and land owned by Lillooet Lake Estates, or LLE. We continue to work with Lillooet Nation as rights holders of the land and are grateful for their ongoing contributions and collaboration on this project. Next slide, please. I won't go into detail on this one. We've seen this one before. Basically, the project scope is to design, construct, and establish operation and maintenance of a debris flow mitigation structure for the Catiline Creek at Lillooet Lake Estates. Next slide, please. Okay, project scope. So the SLRD continues to work with consulting engineers Curwood Liddell, or KWL, as they progress towards completion of the final 100% design drawings and associated cost estimate. We are a few months behind where we had originally planned to be in completing the design. And some of the reasons for design taking longer than planned include additional time and effort required to review compaction specifications, which is a potential cost savings measure. Additional time and effort to design access roads within LLE's Gate 5. Time spent towards understanding the requirements of the various agencies, including the province, the Inspector of Dikes, and DFO. Working with LLE towards stat right-of-way requirements. Working towards approval of a fill site closer to LLE off of the FSR. And reviewing options for mitigating upward pressure on costs, which includes research into grants and discussion with grant authorities. And other organizations and summer vacations of individuals involved in this project at all levels have also factored in to this delay. As you'll see in the upcoming slides, the design is no longer on the critical path, which has given the project team some additional time to sort through some of these important details in design. Next slide, please. So the current approved project budget is 8.1 million, and the 90% design stage overall project cost estimate is 11.5 million. The current budget of 8.1 is based on the 2022 update of the LLE Commission 2016 preliminary design cost estimate, which was used to apply for grant funding and the LLE loan authorization bylaw. We are working towards receiving the final 100% construction cost estimate and finalizing estimates for other project-related costs to form the overall project cost estimate. The construction cost estimate is only one of various components feeding into the overall project cost estimate. We are working with others to finalize cost estimates of various components of the overall project, which include fill site near LLE off of the FSR, spotted owl habitat compensation, engineering, construction, and post-construction services, archaeology to the Department of Fisheries authorization, and land-related costs. We do expect to be able to recommend an updated budget to the SLRD board in October or November, so the board can expect a staff report coming forward then. It is noted that another upcoming deliverable from the engineers is the operations and maintenance cost estimate, which will be an important component in the updated budget considerations. Next slide, please. So the current available funds are up to 11.7 million from ICIP, CEPF, and the loan authorization. We are continuing to maintain awareness of the funding environment through discussions with the administrators of the current confirmed grant funds at EMCR and UBCM. We will continue to evaluate funding options depending on the need and are continuing to look at ways to reduce costs. A separate report is on the agenda related to obtaining board authorization to submit an application to the upcoming October 4th CEPF intake for this project. Next slide, please. So the service was established for the design, construction, and maintenance of the debris flow works. This slide shows the requisition to the cost center set up for the service for the years 23 and 24. The 2025 requisition is listed in the 2024 to 2028 financial plan as anticipated to be 239,000, but is subject to change depending on the information provided by staff and as approved by the board as part of the usual budgeting cycle. Next slide. So this is the loan for up to 4 million associated with the service that the community petitioned for in 2022. To date, no loan funds have been drawn. The amount and timing of drawing funds remains to be determined and is dependent on factors still in progress, including updated cost estimates and project schedule. At this time, staff intend to bring a staff report regarding borrowing and adoption of security issuing bylaw, if required, to the SLRD board in the fall, along with the recommended budget. If the board decides in the fall to draw loan funds and adopts the associated securities issuing bylaw, the SLRD would not actually receive the loan funds until the spring of 2025. Please note this timeline is dictated by the MFA from whom the funds are borrowed. Repayment costs associated with borrowed funds would not start to be payable by the cost center until later in 2025, and the 2025 tax requisition would be developed to reflect this timing. Next slide, please. So project schedule. The gray area on this slide represents the time span between the last update to the board at the end of June, and the dashed lines that you can see there represent the previous schedule. At our last project update in June, we noted efforts were being made to maintain a construction start date in the winter of 24-25. However, this is currently looking as though the construction start date may have to be shifted, and I'll provide a brief summary why the shift may be necessary. Before I do that, just a quick update on a couple other items here. So since the last project update, the archaeological preliminary field reconnaissance has been completed, and we're working towards receiving the final 100% construction cost estimate and finalizing estimates for other project-related costs to form the overall project cost estimate. Should be noted that the check mark shown next to the 100% design and cost indicating completion of that item is an error. At the time of drafting the presentation, we had anticipated it to be complete. However, we aren't quite there yet. Once this is complete, the O&M manual is expected to be updated along with the O&M cost. So into this delay in construction start date. So we've been made aware of additional requirements and review timelines from DFO, which will result in a delay to starting construction of the works. The schedule shown here has been adjusted to show the anticipated impact. We have been working on meeting DFO requirements as a priority so that we can reapply for DFO authorization as soon as possible. The main impact stems from the requirement to complete offsite riparian habitat offsetting, as there isn't sufficient space to complete this on site. We expect to be able to identify an offsite project and develop offsetting designs to allow an updated application to be submitted to DFO in November, such that authorization can be in place by June 2025. Unfortunately, this is expected to move our anticipated start of construction to the fall of 2025. And we are continuing to work with LLE, the design team, DFO, and Lillooet Nation to ensure these items required for this authorization can be submitted or completed in the most effective way possible, time-effective way possible. And we understand that the delay in construction start resulting from the DFO permitting process is not good news for the project, and we're working to minimize the impact for elements of the process that are within our control. Additional revisions to the schedule may be required as we learn more about DFO's requirements and timelines for a review. Next slide, please. So again, these are our top 5 risks. So risk item number 1, delays in obtaining permits and approvals. Since project initiation, we've taken steps to mitigate risks of delays in obtaining permits and approval by submitting applications as early as possible and continue to work with the approving authorities to ensure permits and approvals will be complete prior to construction. We've also been working with First Nations who are part of their requirements. Unfortunately, at this time, we are expecting to face a delay in obtaining DFO authorization, despite taking steps to avoid this. Risk item number 2 is securing required land interests. The project will require the statutory right-of-way be finalized prior to tendering. And until the completion date for this is confirmed, there is still a potential for schedule impacts. Number 3, upward pressure on costs. Although we've taken some measures to reduce the impacts here, there are a few items that we're continuing to monitor and manage related to land, habitat compensation, completion of design and construction. We continue to work to identify cost savings measures to mitigate areas where cost pressures may be unavoidable. Number 4, schedule delays. We're currently seeing some of these delays materialize with additional time for design, permitting, and finalizing the stat right-of-way. Although the biggest impact to schedule. Risk item number 5, these are risks that are inherent with working on steep slopes, heavy equipment in a populated community, and along a busy Forest Service road. As discussed before, we'll look to place requirements on the contractor through the construction contract, and we'll ensure communication plans and protocols are in place and are effective. Next slide, please. So our next steps include fish salvage and spotted owl application, for which the owl callback survey has now been completed. finalizing the stat right of way within LLE, recommending the revised budget, reapplication for DFO authorization following development of an offsite offsetting plan, finalizing specifications and tender documents, requesting SLRD board for approval to issue a call for construction tenders. And assuming the above steps are completed, we anticipate construction would commence in the fall of 2025 and be complete by the end of 2026. Next slide, please. So in the coming months, we anticipate the board will consider staff recommendations on the following matters. Approval of a revised budget following design and cost estimate updates, design related decisions, related to borrowing, approval to extend the engineer's agreement into the construction phase, approval to authorize issuing a call for construction tenders to initiate the construction services procurement process, and approval for award of construction services. Next slide. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you for your time. If there's any questions, happy to take them.
Any questions? Sal.
Thank you, Mr. Strain. Just curious on the archaeological studies. It said preliminary there, but is it fully complete now?
Preliminary field reconnaissance has been completed. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
I guess my concern is we've been dealing with this for a long, long time, and long before most of us ever even got here. And we're still a long ways out, and it just seems like every time we have these presentations, it gets projected out further and further. And the costs just go up and up and up. And are we, in the end, are we ever gonna have enough money to complete this project, I guess is my question. And how do we get it?
Is that a question for me?
It's a question for you if you want to try and answer it.
Well, you know, we are where we are right now, and we are anticipating to receive that 100% cost estimate soon. And we do have other costs that are creeping in that we are monitoring, evaluating, and assessing. We do hope to be able to return to the board with the overall project cost estimates really soon here.
Chris.
Am I correct in thinking that right now our funding for staff time is general revenue when the cost center is established? Not start paying for our staff time as well for this, or is that more just the actual capital costs and so on?
Clarification, and I might look to Director Clark for this, but are you asking if when we go into operations, would the draw be also paying for staff time? Or is the current staff time covered in general or on the project?
Yeah, I guess to the point of, you know, we're putting a lot of effort into this, and so what is the funding source, and is that changing? Will that start to come from this new cost center?
I can ask Director Clark to clarify, should I get this, if there's more information? As of right now, the time that I'm approving to staff time to this project is going to a task number, which is part of the project costs. And when it comes to moving forward in operations, I don't know the exact design of that service. And would look to Director Clark to answer that if she has that answer.
Thanks. So currently, project costs are coming from grant funding, and staff is coming from tax recognition. And the funds once we start operations, that will be all part of the
budget that is prepared each year for this cost center.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any questions?
If I could ask one. Sorry.
Go ahead, Lauren.
So thank you, Mr. Strain, for that report. The costs that are going up, is part of those costs associated to the DFO delay in authorization? Like, is that a significant part of it, or is that just one of many?
Happy to comment on that, unless Kristen or Philippa, if you want to comment.
Go ahead, Mike.
That is a significant cost impact. We've got to accommodate approximately 40,000 square meters, I believe, of riparian habitat, like planting. So there is a significant cost there. Originally, the project had assumed that all environmental restoration would be completed on site, but now that hasn't been accepted by DFO, another site needs to be found. So it's a completely separate project. So we still do have environmental restoration to complete on site, although it doesn't qualify for riparian space on site for the trees. So that 40,000 square meters of planting is quite it is significant, and it was not anticipated.
Thank you.
Yes, I'll go ahead. Can you turn off your camera, Mike? It might help with the voice note.
Sure.
Thanks. Sal.
I'll just make a comment. This eventually will have to go to tender, right, the project, and we won't know what to expect once the proposals come in. It could be way higher, could be a little bit lower, but just make that comment that we don't know yet.
Yeah, I guess my concern is like with DFO wanting all this habitation, compensation. I'm sure if any one of you went and looked at this creek, it's not exactly prime fish habitat. It's very steep, and yeah, I don't know if they're using this to further their project someplace else, but I know in the times that they have had debris flows there, everything went, so compensating that amount of money, or we don't know what it is yet, but I'm sure it'll be huge. I just seen that has to be really justified, because like I say, that's not one of the prime salmon bearing habitats in this area. So if they're using that to further some other project of theirs at our expense, I find that a little annoying, to tell you the truth. Arlen.
Yeah, thank you. I think maybe my question is, have there been substantial delays there? I get that we've experienced something that will, I've heard referred to as moving goalposts, or maybe not yet designed targets, clearly articulated targets earlier in the project, but is that flow of information timely? I'm just trying to understand is waiting for these various agencies to provide this feedback and to sort of set out the target. Is that been one of the main sources of delay? I'm looking for ways we can help support by maybe advocating. This delay is cost escalation as well, regardless of what the feedback ends up being. So how has that been? If any of these pending approvals throughout the project been really hung up with lengthy delays from the agencies?
you want to answer that, Mike?
Yeah, you know, I mentioned it in my presentation a little that, you know, there's so many parties involved and this work's all interrelated. So there's some aspects of that certainly, but the biggest impact right now is that we're required to find this offsetting project and develop that, and submit that with application for authorization, and then that restarts the clock on the review process. So that's the biggest impact is that time. We can essentially complete the design now, barring any minor changes, but that's the biggest impact is that we cannot proceed with construction until we receive authorization.
I would just add that the other agencies that we've been working with, the timelines that we predicted have pretty much stayed as we'd assumed. So it really is the DFO issue that we're dealing with right now that's kind of moved a lot of these timelines out.
Tony?
Just a question about DFO. Where are they located? The actual people who are dealing with this? Are we talking to someone in Ottawa or what?
I could be wrong here, but I believe the local office is in Burnaby. For the people that we're talking to kind of close to here, but there's obviously, you know, up the chain all the way back to the minister in Ottawa.
And have they actually been out there to the site? Or are they just working from maps?
No one, as far as we know, has been from DFO has been to that site since we put in our application to them.
So that would be something I would suggest we could perhaps do, because you know, if you're just working from maps and using comparing it with streams on the prairies, for example, you might make some poor judgments. So I'd like to see somebody from DFO actually out walking that ground, and maybe that could speed it up a little.
Department,
So
Yeah, thank you. I'm just looking at the funders of this being other federal agencies and the delay driving the delay and maybe additional complexity sort of driving the price tag on this. I wonder if there's support from our MP on this particular topic. We had a similar issue in Squamish around a federal funding diking project being held up by DFO, driving the cost up, and then no longer having the funds to achieve it, but because of this. So this is a reoccurring sort of scenario in slightly different incarnations. So I think the funders and whether that's these funds themselves or the funders being the Fed, the federal government should be aware of what's happening here and perhaps it is an area of advocacy for this particular piece.
May I, through the chair, earlier today, we did approve a letter to support LLE's letter to DFO, to the minister. So LLE is taking a political angle on this. We believe our MP is very much aware of this. The hope was that it would be addressed as in an expedited view because of the severe catastrophic possibility of an event taking place. The decision was it isn't imminent, so it needs to go through the practical. Looking at the timeline that the staff addressed, they really addressed the timeline with DFO based on, in hopes that it would be expedited, but knowing that it could be lengthened. I will say that we are in talking to the LLE, we are swim laning this, where part of our approach is to adjust the timeline at the current request of the DFO and support LLE in the political maneuvers they're doing in order to move back to an expedited process with DFO.
Yeah, sorry, just if I could, just on this point, and then I see these issues as slightly, you know, they're interrelated, but the issue of delays driving cost and them being their own funding source, like, you know, and then we get caught, this table and the residents get caught in this space between it. And I think that's slightly different than expediting and all that. It's this whole sort of larger challenge that's the overarching concept there, but I appreciate that we're pushing in areas, but yeah, this is a challenging concept.
Tony,
Well, I'm just wondering if there's a role for us to play here directly with our MP. That if we're, I understand, accept the staff are doing things and working with LLE and they're doing their own advocacy. But, we're still talking about it. Maybe there's something we should do as a body to contact our MP directly and try to apply some pressure.
I think that is a good idea.
Yeah, through the chair, I just want to confirm. I believe that, I'll confirm if the current letter actually is also going to RMP. I believe it is.
So it's a letter from,
This board.
oh, okay.
But I recognize Director Herford's 40,000 foot view that there's this, and then there's all the dominoes it hits. Yeah.
Hey, any other questions? We're all good? Okay, so we just, motion to receive. Moved, seconded, call the question. All in favor, opposed, motion carried. That's the first of that. Now we have the second that. That staff time be allocated to cost center 2406. Allocate to complete the application and proceed with grant related requirements.
Sorry, just a
Moved and
second.
seconded.
Sorry, I moved proceed, which was of 8.2, so we actually haven't done the first of that.
Okay.
We're on 8.3.
That one's just.
Okay, so that, thank you. So now we go to 8.3.
Okay.
We haven't done 7.7.
Can I, through the chair, we have another timed one coming up. So what we're going to do is bring in 8.2, 8.3, 8.4. Our timed one is 8.5, so we'd like to get that before 2:30.
Well, let's quickly go back to 7.7, get rid of that one. We have time.
Because we have the staff in the room in regards to the community emergency preparedness grant opportunity. I think from a time perspective, if we could go to 8.3 next, as staff are here to speak to that.
Okay. 8.3, request for decision, community emergency preparedness fund grant opportunity. And who's going to speak to this then?
Hi, thanks, Chair. I can provide a few brief notes if you would like.
Yeah, please.
Thank you, Philippa Campbell, Project and Program Coordinator for the SLRD. So just a brief overview, this report, part of the ongoing work for the Catiline Creek debris flow mitigation project that you've just received a status update on, is reviewing the funding strategy and landscape as we progress through the design and receiving updated project costs to look for opportunities to explore. As just outlined in the status update, we are still working towards 100% deliverables and the associated cost estimates, and we are coordinating with external parties on those. Unfortunately, so this is providing a quick update on two items. Previously, the board had given approval for us to look at the Disaster Resilience and Innovation Fund to potentially submit an expression of interest. Now, unfortunately, we did not have all the information needed to put together an expression of interest for that program. The due date was September 15th, 2024. So that's the brief update on that piece. There's potentially a spring intake coming, so we will be keeping an eye on that one. This report is mainly focused on the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund. Again, we're not able to make a full presentation for consideration today. We are still waiting on information to come in, but we are looking to see if we are looking to recommend request a resolution to proceed with an application if a suitable proposal can be put together by the due date of October 4th. A resolution is, as usual, one of the requirements of the application package, and this will be the last time we have an opportunity to put this before you. Part of the work that we would need to do is additional coordination with fund managers to ensure any proposal we put together is compatible with the current funding that the project is receiving. So that's my brief update. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions?
Oh, just, could all three be moved at one time?
No.
No,
First two can.
I'll move the first two.
Second.
That's,
Moved in second. Call question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried.
maybe I'll move the third of that.
Okay, seconded. Yep. Moved in second, call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. Now. There's three.
Thank you.
You want to go back to?
8.4 and 8.5, we have to, we got 8.4 and 8.5.
Okay. 8.4 direction request PDIF application for one-time funding by the Village of Permanent towards a Truth and Reconciliation community event on September the 30th, 2024. Moved, seconded. Call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. Thank you. Information report, 2024 New Control Regional Gathering. What was said report? Motion to receive.
Jeanette's here for any questions.
Any questions? Go ahead.
I just wanted to say this was great, and even right down to the title, we heard during this that there was I've heard repeatedly that documenting this wasn't to be, what was heard, but what was said. I thought this, even right from the title, was, you captured that, so good job. And I guess I'll move, okay, I was gonna move receipt if you.
Yeah, I can speak actually after it's moved. I'll second it.
Yeah.
I'll speak to it then, I guess. I ended up having to not attend because of Squamish Nation events that I had to support or was important to support. But I really appreciated reading the report because it's so heavy on quoting what people actually said. And so I felt like rather than sort of a description, hearing everyone's words or reading everyone's words gave me a real sense of the discussion. I really appreciated that sort of way of writing the report, so it's helpful.
Okay, move to receive that. Move, seconded. All question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. Now we go back to 7.7. Request for decision zoning amendment bylaw number 1873-2024 electoral area B housekeeping amendments. Kim?
Did you want a presentation on this?
Just a brief update, yeah.
Yeah, so this bylaw is really just to correct some housekeeping errors in the bylaw that had the numbering differing from what it should be. So this just corrects the numbering. Our legal counsel advised that we should come back and do this correctly.
Very good. Seconded. All question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. Now, is that good for both that? Okay, now, second that. Move, seconded. All the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried.
I'm just gonna make Vivian's happy with all that.
Yeah. 8.1. CAO verbal update.
CAO verbal update. The one first thing on the verbal update is something that came up today with Director LaFrance, which is permissive tax exemptions and nonprofit housing. Different from municipalities, SLRD, regional districts don't have the ability to give tax exemptions, permissive tax exemptions to nonprofits, except under some very restricted areas, including, like she said, recreation. It came to us a request from Lillooet Nation and their development for nonprofit housing to request tax exemption. In looking at it, we realized that we don't have the ability and we are not permitted to do so. So the request is to write a letter to the province pointing out this oversight as we try to build accessible, available housing that we allow we allow consideration for permissive tax. This is not specific to the Lillooet Nation request. It's just requesting that regional districts have the ability to do that in consideration for nonprofit housing organizations.
Chris,
I support writing that letter. I think one nuance to be careful of when we do that is, BC Housing is funding the not-for-profit. Maybe that's not a case where we want to give, because expect the province to fund the stuff, but if it's a sort of an unassociated nonprofit, then maybe we do want the ability. So, I guess we want to just be careful that we're not encouraging a download in terms of BC Housing.
Great point.
So,
Just curious on the municipal side, is that allowed?
Yes.
It is?
Sorry.
Yeah, so, yeah, I approve of sending a letter.
Thank you.
Do you want a motion?
a motion and moved and seconded to write a letter.
I'll speak to this briefly. I think the ask, of course, is that we have the ability to do it, but I just want to reinforce Director Pettingill's point. And we do, as a municipality, have our municipalities do have opportunity to do this, but it is some funding models for affordable housing include operational pieces such as paying your taxes. So we want to be careful that we're not, when we actually get this tool, how we use it. But I do think that it's totally appropriate that the tools should be the same between local governments. So I support it, but words of caution that careful what you ask for on this.
Okay, moved and seconded, call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. That. Now,
Thank you very much.
camping at Checkers.
Yes, something, a hot topic that's happened at the table and amongst the community is the camping that's taking place at Checkers Lake and Wedge Creek Forest Service roads. And just an update for everyone that there is a meeting with Fire Chief Rob Van Doren and all of the interested parties involved to review that and to look at how to make it a safer summer and overall environment moving forward. So I wanted to let everyone know that because I know the questions are coming into the community. So you could expect an information update coming in November or December on that topic.
Just for my information, is this do we know if this is more of an issue of just visitors and maybe not camping appropriately, or is this a case of unhoused individuals sort of trying to find a place to?
Through the chair, it's the latter,
Okay.
which is the concern.
And it seems to be getting more and more, it's a busy parking lot there. When I went by yesterday, there had to be at least 8 or 10 motorhomes there and they're all stacked in, so they're permanent parking.
No time.
Mike, go ahead.
There's a similar issue going on in Rutherford as well. I don't know if the conversations you're having captures all that or if you're pointing out specifics, but I would, if you are going specific sites, I would indicate that Rutherford is a pretty big camp these days.
Thank you for that. Okay, next one, update on the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Strategy application for the Ministry of Health 2004. And I believe April, motion was passed by this board to apply for a grant specifically to provide predictions and risk ranking of source water bodies post-wildfire to inform public health protection specific to Gun Lake. And I'm here to share that unfortunately that grant was not successful. The organization, the SLRD, will continue to pursue these opportunities as much as possible. Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy did notify us a couple of weeks ago that it was not successful. Continue to strive towards achieving that goal. And the last one is update on UBCM conference. And I want to let everyone know that I attended with many people here at the UBCM conference last week. We had many meetings, and specific and highlight meetings with ministries includes we had a C2C UBCM First Nations and Leadership Council, a provincial-wide community all-day meeting on Monday, which was very good and informative, and anyone else who attended here probably likely agree with me. On Monday, we met with the Honorable Josie Osborne from Ministry of Energy, Mines and Lower Carbon Innovation, which also included BC Hydro in attendance. And we were talking about the Jack Webster Bridge, Paradise Valley Road, advocating for more support and ownership on maintenance of that area, and then also creating a BC Hydro trust for SLRD electoral area A. And then on Tuesday, we met with the Premier and staff regarding regional transit, establishing a sea to sky regional transit system. That meeting was hosted by Premier and was attended by representatives and mayors from Squamish, from the municipality of Whistler, Resort Municipality of Whistler, from Pemberton. We also had in-person Hal Salem, chairperson for Squamish Nation and Squamish Nation staff, and Area D Director Rainbow. Thank you very much. And MLA Sturdy also attended. So it was a successful meeting, and the point of that we were there requesting an establishment of regional transit for the system between North Vancouver and Mount Currie and the Yukon Nation. And our voices were heard. There was no response on action. However, we did feel heard. Wednesday, we met with Honorable George Chow from the Minister of Citizen Services regarding internet service to remote communities. This is specifically to nonprofit internet services organizations that are affected by wildfire and do not have the tools to rebuild as quickly as provincial services that are affected by wildfire. Thank you to Director Saldemer for speaking at that meeting. And then the other one was regarding, attended by CAO Paul in all regional districts regarding farming event rules, as discussed at this table many times with Honorable Pam Alexis. That was led by the Lower Mainland Local Government Association. And we also met with Honorable Bronwyn Ma, the Minister of Emergency Management. There were two meetings, the first one was all regional districts regarding funding and supports for emergency response and planning and mitigation. And then the next meeting was very specific to risk mitigation and recovery support for Reed Road, advocating for that. And then the other one being the 2023 Casper Creek and wildfire, Downton Lake wildfires in response to that. And that was focused on the recovery funds that are being spent from select funds and other select funds that really advocate for the province to focus funding and efforts on recovery when it comes to those things that have an environmental impact. An example of that is ash, carcinogens in ash and asphalt and asbestos on property, whether it be a primary owner or a secondary owner, if they choose not to or can't afford to fix that or clean it up, that runoff does go into the community and into the water system, and that does affect the entire community. So the request was to consider increasing recovery supports financially for secondary homeowners when it comes to cleanup that impacts the entire community. And it was a great conference. My watch kept asking me if I was doing a run. And I just told them I was running between meetings and heels. So thank you very much. It was my first one, and I do look forward to the next one. And I feel like the benefits are clear from day one for attendance to that conference.
I just wondering, thought that went through my head coming out of the Premier's office after the regional transit meeting was that it's time that the partnership, the committee perhaps gets together and talks about our path forward. So if I have the support of this table, I'd like to propose that we take our voice here to make that meeting happen.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Call the question, all in favor? Opposed, motion carried.
Good,
Yeah, motion to receive. Moved and seconded. Call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. Okay, 8.6. Request for decision, UBCM CRI 2025 FCFS funding stream. That Squamish-Lillooet Regional Board supports an application to the Union of BC Municipalities for 2025 Community Resilience Investment for up to $600,000 for the Fire Smart Community Funding and supports all areas of the and that the SLRD board approved staff time to provide grant to project management and the administration of ×2 casual part-time positions and 1 contractor for the duration of the project. Any questions of Mr. Mark?
Sure, we also have Maud Lucier here, who's our wildfire mitigation lead.
Hi, Maud. You want to speak to this?
If the board has questions, I'm happy to answer.
Any questions? Chris?
I'll move it. Yeah.
Okay, move, second it.
I don't have a comment. I think the work that Maud and Mark are doing, and this is excellent. And we just got some movement happening in area D that so I really hope we can push forwards with this.
For clarity, I moved the first 2 that.
Yeah. Okay. So moved and seconded. Call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. Third dot.
So.
So moved, seconded. Yeah, call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. Yes, thank you so much to Mark and Maud and all your crew, because yeah, everybody I know in area C is very happy with what's happening. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
8.7, request for decision, UBCM Asset Management Planning Program Funding Application. Okay, seconded. Call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried.
Do that. I'll move the second that if that's
Okay. You're moving the second that?
second that, yeah.
Seconded. Okay. Move to second and call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. Thank you. 8.8, information report, 2024 second quarter financials. Suzanne and Colin, I believe. So Colin, are you going to speak to this?
Sure. Colin Hodgins, Deputy Director of Finance. This is our second quarter financial report. These financials cover January to June 2024. And I'll just maybe open it up for questions if anyone has anything they would like answered.
Any questions from you, Chris?
Nothing jumped out at me as a concern, but is there anything that we should be aware of or paying attention to in this?
There's nothing super pressing within the information report. We did list some key highlights, mainly focusing on remaining reserve balances and how expenses and revenues are pacing against budget. There was really nothing that is substantially out of line with our budget at the moment.
Dal, go ahead.
Yeah, I've got a question on the Growing Community Fund, Community Growing Fund. On the interest, what happened? There's quite a bit of interest that's been accrued. What will happen to it?
It's very deep.
Like just there's another question, but it's a good one because it was $42,000.
Yeah, there is quite a bit of interest from the Growing Community Fund reserve balance. That's something we're actually probably looking into in the near future. Also with that is a review and an update of where the current projects are at within the Growing Communities Fund. And maybe potentially allocate that revenue for other projects and review the status of the others. So that should be coming down the pipe, hopefully in the next couple months.
Okay, thank you. That's part of my next question is, all these projects that are gonna be happening with the Community Works Fund, it has to come to the board through a resolution. I'm just curious on all the projects that'll be coming out of the Growing Community Fund, will that be the same process? Or has it been the approvals that were made in the when we had the meeting in Lillooet? Was that approval to go forward with projects?
The Growing Communities Fund balance was allocated previously via resolution. And some of those projects have begun, others have not. And so that's what we're going to do, is review the status of those and see if reallocations are needed, or if we can allocate those interest revenue to new or existing projects.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Motion to receive. Moved and seconded. Call question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. 8.9, request for decision, temporary use permit number 68, Jeffrey Edward Area D. Want to speak to this, Kim?
Yeah, through the chair, Kim Needham, Director of Planning and Development Services. This is a request for and a TUP for the outbound station. Previous TUP was issued 3 years ago, and this is just a renewal. The recommendation is that the TUP be issued and that the CAO be authorized to execute the TUP.
Hey, Chris. Cody, and then Armin.
I guess a little bit of a procedure process question. I'm just sort of curious about the differential in a situation like this between a TUP and a rezoning. You know, we sort of know what this is, and in this case, I was just sort of wondering why we didn't just get a rezoning.
Yeah, through the chair, it's because they are in the process of rezoning next door. They're, I think, waiting on that. Ultimately, they may get authorization to rezone it, but Mr. Edwards, who is the applicant, is not the owner of the property. He's leasing that piece from the owners, which are Tiger Bay, and they have a TUP up next. So I think right now he's just looking for another 3 years, and I think we'll see what happens after that.
So if I can be clear, then Tiger Bay may decide they want to do something different for the whole thing, and therefore they wouldn't bother with the rezoning for this little piece. Then is the idea.
Yeah, I mean, right now this piece isn't part of their overall application. It's not included in their overall plans. They, for whatever reason, didn't include that. So it may be that in the future they'll want to rezone to make that a permanent use.
Armin and then Tony.
Yeah, I think I had some, I had some questions around sort of like what's next here. I'm supportive of this general direction, but I found the image on page 532 of our package quite compelling, and it's something that I've seen, which is the absolute lineup for the washroom, not for the cafe nor the burgers, although they experience theirs as well. So I think this actually provides a very important service, and I'd love to actually see some support for these folks for some funding or something for this. This rest stop function is something that just doesn't happen around in our area due to the volume and the expense of doing it, which is what this private entity is doing. So I think anyways, I just wanted to highlight that particular piece, seeing as Director Pettingill asked my question.
No, I support this. I think in the long term, the proponent might like to own that piece of property. At the moment, he doesn't. They put an awful lot of time and energy into getting it set up and opened, and as has been pointed out, it provides an excellent service, a much needed service, and it complements what is also was available in other parts of Britannia. So I would, do you have a motion on the floor? I'd like to move that we grant this extension to this TUP.
Second?
I did just have a question based on some of the commentary. So is the landowner supportive of this? Because isn't it ultimately the landowner has to apply, not the proponent?
Yes, the landowner is supportive of this.
Okay, moved and seconded. Call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. Eight point 10, request for decision, temporary use permit number 76. Tiger Bay Development Corp., electoral area D.
You through the chair. This temporary use permit application is to enable the use of a Tiger Bay site for a skateboard training facility, a private skateboard training facility for skateboard, National Canada Skateboard. And they also want to utilize the site as for commercial film production. I think, as many of you know, the site has been getting used for commercial film production. This will actually regulate and enable that use to move forward as an allowable use on the site.
Any questions?
Got some comments, okay? You know, in some ways disappointed to see this. I understand the importance of the film industry in the Sea to Sky, and so I won't want to oppose it mostly because of that. But you know, if we approve this, we're pushing back this surf park by 3 years, which pushes back housing by another probably 5 or 6 years, because that's not in phase one. When we did third reading of their rezoning application, the impression I got from them was that everything was in place to move ahead with this surf park, and it clearly isn't. So, and by the way, they haven't talked to me about this at all. The first I saw it was when Anna sent it to me. So I'd kind of like to talk to Tiger Bay. I'd like to see them sitting there and telling us what's their long-term plan. Are they going to come back to us and say, well, we want to rezone again and have this as a filming location, build a sound stage, stuff like that. I mean, that would be quite a reasonable solution or suggestion, I would think. Is that their long-term plan now? Have they given up the surf park and they're wanting to change everything? So again, I'd like to hear from them with that. And then the other thing about filming, this last piece of filming they did had quite an impact on the community. I'm disappointed in the lack of communication between Tiger Bay and the community. When I say it had an impact, they were filming things at night, including gunfire, bright lights, fire, smoke, stuff like that. Now they had an arrangement with the Britannia Beach Fire Department to be on site when they were doing fire events, but it came down to the community association talking directly to people in the film industry and managing to get a few $1,000s sort of compensation for it. But Tiger Bay weren't interested in talking to anybody. Their attitude was, we pay our taxes, that's all. That's the only responsibility that we have. So if this is going to, if they're increasing the amount of filming that's going to be taking place there, then I'd like to see us having some kind of discussion with them about what are their responsibilities, what should their communication be with the community, the local community. That's one thing. Another thing that comes up, I've got a whole list of things here. Sometimes during the summer, they drew water from Outbound Station. And that's been flagged as a problem in that water comes from the mining museum. And there's no metering between the mining museum and Outbound Station. So that's the problem that has to be solved. But then if the filming industry is going to come in and take water as well, without paying for it, that's something else that needs to be discussed and addressed. This private skateboard facility, is that something they want to do just temporarily until they start doing their major production, that they're rezoned for? Or is this something that once it's there, it's going to stay there? And how does that impact the rezoning that we approved in third reading? What is it going to be concrete? I assume that skateboard training at the national level, I would have thought it had to be a fairly extensive installation. So that has to have, either they're going to blow it all apart when they're finished, or and who's paying for that? So I'm not happy about this at all.
Chris, and then Armin.
Yeah, I guess through the chair to my colleagues, so is this a request that we defer a decision pending some specific information, or I guess I'm wondering what.
Yeah, I would like us to, I'd like Tiger Bay to come and sit down with us and talk to us and tell us what their long-term plans are.
Armin, and then Kim.
Yeah, thank you. I've got some experience with temporary use permits, and I know that certain restrictions can be put on them to maybe address concerns of the board, and Director Rainbow brought up some good ones. I was thinking about there's some language that said, I was expecting to see something in here that dictates or reinforces the need for building permits for structures. It kind of mentions it, but it wasn't very clear. And I know that's been a challenge, was an issue on this particular site as from the film use piece. The temporary nature, I think, it kind of makes sense, but I think that I'd like to see some other pieces in here. I think this is an appropriate place to do that, to strengthen, to add some strengths to make sure us and the community understand what is allowed to happen here and under what circumstances. And I just feel like this was really, I think there's a path through, but I felt what's presented here was really light on addressing those types of things. There's we've heard a lot of issues. I know that we've had some challenges around how it interacts with our building requirements. I think it's an opportunity to be explicit about expectations, and I just don't feel like we took that's happened in what I see here. So I just wondered about if there was discussion around that, because this is something that I think some of these issues are known to staff as well. So just what discussion, I guess, led to what we have here, and is there a reason that we're not seeing some more stronger language around that, given that we can do that in a temporary use permit?
Yeah, through the chair. If you actually refer to the permit itself that's attached, point 2 says that this TUP is not a building permit. All buildings and structures over 10 square meters require a building permit. So I think it's been made pretty clear that if the film industry is to produce any structures, they are going to need building permits. We've been very, very clear with the applicants about that through some of the issues that we've dealt with in the past. Also in the report, page 2, under the section on zoning, it says, as noted by the applicant in their submission, once adopted, the pending rezoning of the lands for a wave park and 1,050 units will facilitate future development of the lands commencing in approximately 2 years. The temporary uses have been cited or will be located away from the first stages of development and will be unaffected during the life of the permit. So from what I understand from the applicant, these processes can occur simultaneously in that the temporary use permit for the skate park and the filming will not impact their plans for rezoning and doing the development. It's going to be a number of years anyway before we see shovels in the ground. There's just, a lot of work to be done on the site, so. And then with respect to some of the servicing questions and comments, also on page 2, there is a section on servicing, water and sanitary, and the applicant has been fairly specific to state that, there aren't going to be a lot of impacts. They've also been told that they are outbound station will allow them to use some water for washing, but they will have a portable toilet and a hand sanitizing station associated with the skateboard facility. They've also noted solid waste will be transported off site. So I think they've dealt with their water, wastewater issues effectively. They also speak to some of the WorkSafe BC requirements that are associated with commercial film production. So I'm not sure if there's any questions that haven't been answered in the report itself, that if there would be anything else that the applicant could provide us with that they haven't already answered.
Thank you. I did see that that note that the TUP is not a building permit, but what was missing for me in this, and I don't see it, is that, if these conditions aren't met, then there's nothing here about, this TUP can be giving a lever that the TUP can be revoked should these conditions not be met. Is that not a standard condition of a temporary use permit, that the permit can be revoked if the conditions aren't met, which makes it different than a?
No, TUPs once issued are generally not revocable. That's the tricky part of them. Zoning, we can downzone a property once we give zoning, but once we issue a TUP, it's a little more tricky.
Sal, Mike, Tony.
Thank you. I'm just curious, the last filming that was done there, did they receive a TUP for that?
No. They had a previous TUP that did allow for the film staging and production. And that was associated with a market that they had proposed. And that expired a couple of years ago, and we advised them of the pending expiration, and they opted not to renew it for whatever reason. Later we found out that there had actually been a lot of filming going on the site, and other issues I won't get into here. And so I think it was made clear to them that an ongoing filming use was considered a use on the site. It wasn't just a temporary thing. The SLRD has tended to we haven't had a permitting system for filming, because in most cases the filming has been short-lived. But it's seeming that now more and more of these films are becoming very big productions, and there's a lot of construction involved. And so on this particular site, that has been something that's been ongoing. And so we alerted them to the fact that they needed to renew, they needed to get a new TUP in order to allow for that film use.
I think what I would like to see is their map. I don't think their map is sufficient enough, if it's their map. I'd like to see where the location is gonna be for this, the exact location for the skate park and the filming as it relates to the surf park and the 1,055 units. So it's really clear on a map where they're gonna be doing the filming.
Well, through the chair, the filming is proposed to be across the entire site. Most of the filming is happening on the gravel pit and at Manatee Bay. And so the map outlined in red basically covers off all those holdings, and they do show on there on the top corner on the right where the skate ramp would be, which they claim would be out of the way of their film production. And the actual construction of the wave park is also outside of that area.
Yeah, it's in the big area.
Yeah.
Which they're gonna do some filming, but they say that they're gonna, is it the rezoning that they're gonna look for their project? Or are they actually gonna start working on it?
Yeah, so they have had third reading on the rezoning that would allow for that skate park, or sorry, surf park. And so they have a number of conditions to meet before they can, before we bring the bylaw back for adoption. Plus, we've been waiting over 9 months for the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to review the bylaw. And until MOT signs off on the bylaw, we can't bring it back for adoption.
Okay, thank you.
Mike and Tony? And Chris?
Ms. Needham answered to my satisfaction, a few of the concerns around it. The one thing I didn't hear addressed was some of the, if we can address within the TUP, some of the concerns around community noise and that sort of thing. Is that something that can be included in the TUP, or is that outside of it?
Yeah, thank you through the chair. I believe the TUP speaks to the applicant having to meet all other SLRD bylaws, which would include the SLRD Area D noise bylaw. So they would be subject to that.
Tony?
Well, I had a question about adoption, but that's been answered. And the other question, they had a previous TUP, which would have been, what, 3 years? It lapsed. We've got another TUP now. There's filming been going on there for the 10 years that I've been on this board. So, how much further do we go? At the end of this TUP, is that it for filming?
Well, technically, it would not be a permissible use anymore. So if they were to want to continue using the site for filming, they would have to rezone. And that would fly in the face of their existing rezoning plans, right, for the 1,050 units and the skateboard or the surf park.
Chris?
Yeah, so a temporary use permit may specify conditions under which the temporary use may be carried on. So what is our remedy if we have some conditions and they don't meet them, like once they've granted it? I mean, my assumption had been that we could say like you're invalid, or we can revoke the permit, or like what is our remedy?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think we would have to look at it on a case-by-case basis in discussion with legal counsel.
Armin?
Yeah, I think this feels like an opportunity to enhance our position in these, particularly the noise and impact areas. So issuing this permit saying that all other bylaws applied when we're getting the outcome that we're currently getting. So I feel like there's a that a stronger step can be taken here because the use has proven to be disruptive. Just in that general concept, whether that's posting notice to the community of what's gonna happen, so they're at least aware, like some sort of mechanisms to sort of proactively go after these pieces that have been a tension point, I think are important to me. And things like that can be included in a temporary use permit. So I'd like to be able to work through that with the group to understand what that is. And I'm researching, as I know Director Pettingill was on something else. Turns out that what I'm looking for is buried in a massive PDF file, so I will find that and report back. But I do feel like it's just a missed opportunity to address some of these community concerns. I know we can do it through the temporary use permit. And I think that saying that all of our regulations apply, it just isn't far enough, because all the regulations apply and we're getting the outcome that we're getting already. And I suppose inversely, I thought it was weird that meeting Vancouver Coastal Health's regulations was specifically called out in there, because to operate whatever it is you need to operate, you need to satisfy all the bodies that would apply to it. So I don't know why we would include specifically Vancouver Coastal Health. I'm not saying Vancouver Coastal Health isn't important, but you need to satisfy all the requirements of whoever's involved in your operation. So was there a particular reason that was specifically put in there? It felt out of place to me.
Yeah, through the chair, I think that's a fairly standard clause, and it covers off any kind of waste related issues that that might exist. So it's sort of, a standard clause.
So we're not putting ourselves in a position where we need to take some responsibility for their compliance with Vancouver Coastal Health. Like their own, inspection and enforcement.
No, it's just it's a way that we cover ourselves.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Jack?
Thanks for the report. I think the film industry is like a good industry, and a lot of people in our corridor work in it, and feels like it's something that we want to support if we can. I'm wondering if the TUP and the reality that it will sort of conclude the opportunity without zoning has been run by Creative BC or whoever the regulator of film in British Columbia is for their comment, so that we can make sure that we're not doing damage to the opportunity to promote film production in this area.
Right.
Through the chair, I did speak to Creative BC a few weeks ago, specifically regarding a few items that we had open, including our work towards a film permit. I think they have been very vocal in support of filming in this location and are aware that the top is separate from the building regulations. Creative BC still understands that we are following the building code. They don't agree with the building code, and they're working with the province on getting that changed. I don't know how successful they'll be, and nor do they, to be honest. To define a temporary building as also included as film sets regardless of size. From preliminary conversations, likely won't be successful, and I think we'll be in the same place. Does this address Creative BC's concerns? No. Does it impact Creative BC's concerns? No. They would be happy to see a temporary use permit on this property so that they know that all contracts moving forward are operating under proper authority of the land use. The building permit argument is outside of this, if that makes sense. So I guess the best way to say it is, because there was no top on it, it was hard to even look at the building permits. The first thing when you want a building permit is you have to have a top. There was no top, so they couldn't make it. This filming organization that was there is absolute professionals, likely probably some of the best plans you'll ever see. Unfortunately, with the top, we couldn't look at it. And that would be the primary part of the frustrations that, from what I understand, the film industry felt.
Other question, do other communities apply the same policies we do to similar productions?
When speaking with communities, they interpret the use of temporary differently. I think we're probably going a little bit into what was discussed in closed, so I'm trying to be careful. But when speaking to other communities, some of them interpret it differently than we do. However, legally, we are interpreting it as the BC Building Code applies. And we go by the BC Building Code. Some of their frustration was putting examples with City of Vancouver and other cities that go by a different, they have different codes than what we have to follow as a regional district.
So I guess my question then is, other jurisdictions interpret building code or whatever different than we do. Why don't we all get on the same page and we all interpret it the same way? Because obviously this creates an issue. We interpret it differently. So these people come in to our area to do business and they're doing it the way they did it somewhere else, but now they're in conflict. So can we get all on the same program? Chris?
Yeah, I guess try to take a bit of a step back. So we were recently asked for a bunch of uses. There's a bunch of community consultation, and so there's a rezoning. Now we're asked for 2 different uses. One is filming, which is already happening, and then a new one, skateboard. There's been skate park. There's been some community feedback, it sounds like, about the film use, but maybe for broad reasons, some considerations for that. So I guess, you know, I'm trying to understand, it almost feels like the skate park is like a red herring thing. I'm not sure if that's central or important or a source of concern. This is not really a concern. It's not really important either, and so it doesn't matter. Or like what is the? Yeah, I guess I'm just really trying to figure out what are people comfortable with, and all I have is sort of the feedback on the rezoning, and versus what is the real need of the proponent. And I guess thinking is I want to minimize the uses we add, given there is a lot of community interest, it seems, in what does and doesn't happen here.
Mike?
Just sitting listening to all the comments, I think they're all really well placed. From what I've heard, Tiger Bay is a couple of years away from doing some of the major work to make this project that we did the rezoning for a reality. Sounds like this TUP won't get in the way of that progress when they are ready to start. I don't want to see a whole bunch of uses attached to it and then it just goes on forever. The nature of the TUP is that you can't renew it after another 3 years, so they would have to look at a rezoning. So from my mind, from where I'm sitting, it seems like a good temporary use of the land. It's a good industry in our corridor. It provides some good jobs and some good industry. I'm happy. I don't want to see. I'm hopeful that next month they don't come up and go, okay, now we want a drive-in theater, and next month we want a this or that. So warning to Tiger Bay, that's not the idea. Having a training facility where a maximum of 10 skateboarders are going to be at a time, which is what I read in the report. It was maximum 10, I think. That to me is low impact to the community. The film industry is a good one. I just want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that limits the impact to the neighbors and the residents nearby in terms of noise and that sort of thing. I appreciate Ms. Needham's comment about the noise bylaw. I also hear Director Hereford in that we could probably make that even a little bit stronger to make sure that the impacts and the noise do not impact the neighbors in Britannia North. So I'm personally happy with the use, recognizing that it can only go on for another 3 years. I just want to make sure that their gunshots and fires aren't keeping people up at night. That's my concern.
Yeah, I'm not in any way opposed to the film industry. I recognize what it does for the area, including Britannia. There's a lot of people in Britannia that work in the film industry. And I'm not suggesting that they could never have bright lights and gunfire at night, but there should be some communication. The community should know when it's going to be happening. And there should be some recognition on the part of producers of those films that there should be some compensation there. The community shouldn't have to, the association shouldn't have to go begging for a few $1,000s. The industry should be the ones that approach the community and say, this is what's going to be happening, here's what we'd like to do for you. That sort of process is what I would like to see in there. I should mention that I just got a text from Tony Prochesovich informing me that the skateboard thing is going to be a wooden construction. So, relatively.
One last question. Okay. On the TUP, if they come for another TUP for a totally different reason, is that TUP just for the filming and the skate park? But if they come again for something different, or is it the TUP is for that property?
The TUP is for the property, specific to the uses that have been requested. So those will be spelled out in the permit itself. Yeah, so it does say on the permit that any changes are considered to be a new permit.
And can they get a new permit?
They would, yes, they would have to, although we do have some limits set out in our temporary use permit policy, because temporary use permits are not meant to be like a sort of a de facto rezoning or to fill in for zoning. It's not meant to go on and on forever. The community wants to have surety about the land uses in their area, right? So these are just meant to be kind of a patchwork until zoning is in place. And so
is there any wording in that actually states that this is your last TUP?
well, the wording in this particular permit says that this TUP may be renewed for a maximum of 3 years. That's 0.10. So that's a standard in our TUPs, is they get a 3-year issuance plus a 3-year renewal. Board can choose to not allow it to be renewed, or they can say that it can be renewed for 1 year, or whatever the case may be. This particular permit is proposing a 3-year renewal period.
Thank you.
Are we disregarding the earlier TUP then? This is a brand new start with an opportunity to renew.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, did you have something to add?
I just wanted to recognize and again reinforce that it's very important for this organization to have a film permitting process, and a lot of the items that have been brought up here will be effectively addressed during that film permitting process, including compensation to communities, notification to communities, even noises that might be outside of our noise bylaw time. Gunshot fired at 6 p.m., which is within our noise bylaw, still cause concern. And that's where film permits, and that is definitely a large post-it note on my wall. And why we've been in conversation with Creative in BC, trying to find funding models that will help build that.
Okay, do you want to move this?
Sure. I move the issuance of the TUP.
Seconded?
No. I had a question.
No? Okay.
I'll speak to it. Or Mr. Ward.
No, go ahead.
I think that I understand CEO Paul's solution around a filming permit, really looking after some of the concerns, the most appropriate place for that, but right now we're contemplating issuing a TUP where we've had concerns around the community about the filming impact, about the temporary use that's being requested. I think this is an opportunity where we could add something that's not onerous. I don't think we're gonna be able to put compensation in there. We're not gonna be able to do, you know, some things, but we could add that any filming needs to have, you know, notice posted for properties within a kilometer. We could do something around, you know, clarifying that noise exemptions would be required after 10 or 11 o'clock at night, whatever appropriate time is, and tie that to an enforcement mechanism. In a recent District of Squamish temporary use permit, the language is exactly under the enforcement clause. This permit may be varied or revoked due to significant change in circumstances from those contemplated at the time of its issuance without limiting any other options available to the district. The permit may be varied, suspended, revoked, or canceled if any of its terms, conditions, restrictions, or requirements are not being met or cannot be met by the permit holder. A clause such as that, with some strings to positively impact without overly burden the use, I think would be totally appropriate. And in the absence of that, given the impact, I'm not ready to support this. I think it should be referred back to staff with an enforcement mechanism and at least some simple clauses to put us in a better position given that we do not have a film permit process at this point and we aspire to get one, but some interim measure here is appropriate as the use is being considered for up to 6 years, which I think is a long time to go without any regulations. I won't be supporting it. I'd be supportive of referring this back to staff. I think there's a path forward to making this supportable, but this isn't it.
I agree.
Can I make a comment on it?
Yes, go ahead.
Just, we've got something very similar in the, I think it was area C and D on your TUPs for bed and breakfast. Right? Where there's a condition on it, on the neighborhood.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, there was a condition. And it was about, you know, if there was any complaints from the neighborhood. It is in there, I know. For temporary use permits.
My only comment to what Armin just suggested is if you put those restrictions on, so for after hours, you know, pyrotechnics or whatever, and that may be all part of the actual filming of the film or whatever. If we put those restrictions on, that could just kill the project. Because if they can't produce that in that time frame, they don't have a project, right? So I think we have to think about the consequences of our actions to how it impacts their ability to produce. Armand and then Tony.
Just to that point, just directly, I think that the types of things I was speaking about could be classified as potentially industry best practices and maybe even recommendations from Creative BC. So this is just ensuring that when the landowner, that is who we're authorizing the use, enters into a contract, that it's of the utmost importance to that party to ensure that those things happen because it gives us a lever. So I'm not saying that any of these things I don't think are overly onerous. We could even, the language of a referral back to staff would be to work with Creative BC to establish some reasonable criteria for this to address community concerns. I would expect things like this to be in there. And I don't think it needs to be overly onerous, but it needs to be clear to the community what we're doing. And I think that approving something without addressing community's concerns, which we've seen and heard and felt, is not the right step at this point.
Yeah, I don't think I didn't understand there to be an intent that we said you can't do those things at night, you know, after dark and things like that. Just that when you are going to do those things at that time, that there are some procedures in place that you will follow. And I don't see them as being particularly onerous.
You comfortable with that?
Yeah, I'm happy, like I said, my only concern was around some of the community complaints, so I'm happy to move in that direction, so. Whatever is easiest, if we want to defeat the motion and have a motion to forward it back to staff, we can, or I can rescind it, but I think we have a seconder on it already.
I don't think we.
We have a seconder?
Did we have a seconder? So
I would suggest that we just call the question and I'm in support of that.
Just procedurally, if we defeat it, can we, is it not defeated and it becomes a new application? Should we not
rescind?
Because I don't think we can send a defeated motion back. I just want to make sure that we stay on side procedurally.
Or if it's a good question.
I don't want to defeat it if it's, or.
You're not making an amendment?
Yeah, that's, can I amend it to say with some consultation and some work done with staff and the proponent on how to manage residential concerns around along those lines, is that? If we defeat it, it's gone, right?
I'm not too sure about defeating and what happens. I'd need a little bit of a recess in which to say that, but we can do an amendment to the resolution based on that, but.
Sorry, just if I can, my concern with that, the motion was to approve, and I wanna know exactly what it is that we're contemplating, so I would prefer that this just be referred back to staff to be considered to work through this rather than try to amend it to include certain language that is vague and is out there and is already somehow pre-approved by this board. So that's where I'd like to get us to personally, but I don't know.
It's defeated. If there's a motion that's seconded.
Need to work
I think we make an amendment. We can make an amendment.
Yeah, I'm gonna propose a recess. I think Angela knows where we're trying to go with this, so why don't we give our corporate officer?
Yeah, we need to do our 5-minute recess anyway, so.
There you go.
Okay.
Reopen this meeting and
I'd like to table 8.10 until tomorrow. Make a motion.
Seconded.
okay. Moved and seconded. Call first, all in favor. Opposed, motion carried. So 10 goes to
8.15.
We can staff won't be here tomorrow for these two.
okay, so yeah. We're gonna move over to 8:15 and 8:16. Staff, we need them here today. They won't be here tomorrow. So 8.15, request for decision, follow up on Berken Recreational and Cultural Society's request for the old Berken Schoolhouse. Omar and
Ally.
thanks, Ellie.
Would you guys like a brief just run through of what we're
Please.
looking at here? Okay, so want to talk today request for decision for the Berken Schoolhouse. This was brought to the board in September 2022, which time the board passed a resolution asking staff to bring a report back on the possibility of transferring the lease for the schoolhouse to the BRCS. And also the staff include an estimated staff time allocation to that work. Since then, we've been talking to the province about the possibility of transferring the lease to the society. And we have come up with two options. The first is to, as previously suggested, to just transfer, to create a lease for the society that would be a sublease from the SLRD. That would involve meeting a number of requirements set out by the province for us to create that sublease, including length of tenure agreement, eligibility of society as a subtenant and ensuring that the land falls within the approved uses for that sublease. The second option that was discussed with the province was to actually split the parcel into two separate leases so that the SLRD would maintain a lease over the Birkin Fire Hall portion of that parcel, and the other half of the parcel will be reallocated as a primary sublease to the Birkin Recreational and Cultural Society, so that they have control of the Birkin Schoolhouse, which will enable them to update, maintain, and take care of the schoolhouse moving forward. Now, the first option would, the sublease option would require the SLRD to maintain communications and be there for the society if they needed to ask for permission, because we would still be the initial primary leaseholder. The second option, where we split the parcel into two separate leases, would mean that we would still have to work with the society to begin that transfer of the Birkin Schoolhouse portion of the parcel to them. But after that work's completed, we would no longer have to maintain or be involved with that portion of the parcel, because it would be completely separated into the society's lease. Now, for the staff time allocation, it's estimated that about 40 hours would be needed to prepare a sublease, but that doesn't take into account the hours needed to maintain that sublease moving forward. The second option to split the parcel into two leases would be estimated to be roughly 100 hours to completely transfer that half of the parcel into the society's lease. It's worth noting that currently the schoolhouse does have an asset retirement obligation. That's estimated right now to be between $45,000 to $50,000. So currently the SLRD would be the ones that would need to be looking to provide those funds when the building becomes basically unmanageable. If that schoolhouse is transferred into a lease to the society, that would be something for them to look into in terms of funding. It would not be part of the SLRD's requirement. So we would like to propose to pursue a modification of the current lease to split it into two sections so that the SLRD would have one half of the parcel and the society the other. And like I said, the other option would be a sublease, which is not the preferred option for staff. Any questions?
No, just curious, who owns the properties currently? And in particular, presuming that the Crown owns it, and the SLRD's got a lease.
Yes.
The schoolhouse, who owns the schoolhouse?
So you're right, the schoolhouse is within that Crown parcel. I think I would have to talk with planning about that and development about that, but I believe it would be owned by the province because it's part of the Crown parcel, but I'm not entirely sure on that one.
Yeah, going back a few years, BRVCA rented off the school board for very little. The old teachers in the Old Bridge, eventually the school board gifted to them for $1. So there's an example of, yeah. So the interesting question to me is who actually owns the schools?
I think at the moment, we know that to retire that asset will be on SLRD. So I think it could well be the SLRD, but I'm not entirely sure. I'd have to look into that.
Any other questions? So do you want a recommendation here? or-
That's right here, the option
Yeah.
outlined here is to split the lease.
Yeah.
And not sublease.
No, just split the lease. And step away then.
Yeah, and then we lose that asset retirement obligation and we have no more obligations for that. So else.
Armin.
I can move that staff recommendation.
Moved and seconded. Call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried.
I'll move to second that if that. So they're both together. Okay, I move to second that in that first.
We read 16, that's true. We got time?
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, request for decision, grant applications, rural economic diversification and infrastructure program and active transportation program. Allison.
Allison McDonald, Parks and Trails Coordinator. It's two grant applications that we'd like to move ahead with for the Checkers Canyon section of Sea to Sky Trail, and I will have a couple more next month as well.
So
And I wonder if we had an amendment to it. I know a number of us met quickly with, or not quickly, we met a few months ago with the Minister of Tourism, who's very interested in these long trails and was very supportive of our work. I wonder if, in addition to applying for this fund, if we send a little note to the minister saying, hey, know you're a big proponent of this, just thought we'd let you know, just in case there was any support or advocacy that can be had for the application. So I'd like to amend the motion to add, including a letter to Minister of Tourism.
Good with that?
there is no minister. Campaign.
No, there's no minister of anything.
She'll promise you whatever you want.
We have to wait till she gets reelected.
Yeah.
I think it still holds because we can send it to the new Minister of Tourism when dust settles here, but.
What's the deadline for application?
Through the chair, the deadline's October 31st and the election is the 19th, so I will be communicating with her. If she wins it.
Okay, moved and seconded.
Sorry, question. Is that motion to communicate to Lana Popham to get her to say she supports this, or is it to the Minister of Tourism?
Well, until a minute ago, I was considering them one and the same. I just thought that she was such a energetic and enthusiastic supporter of this that if we let her know, she might sort of jump on board and see if we can.
I would say, because I think you're right. I think it should be Lana Popham. Like, I think she's the one that was excited about this, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay.
That's the amendment. Friendly amendment.
Okay, moved and seconded. Call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried.
No, there's some tourism interest somewhere, like.
And the second one?
Bye, guys.
Moved and seconded.
November
Yeah.
15th.
Okay. Call the question, all in favor? Yes. Opposed, motion carried.
All right, thank you.
And now we have the motion to adjourn.
Are you not gonna do a chair?
Yeah, but it doesn't, again, we all met with her and it's good.
We gotta do our hospital bus.
She's on my list.
You and
So motion to adjourn.
double done.
Yeah. Seconded. Call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried.
See you later, Sal.
Drive safe, Sal. Drive safe.